The rain fell softly outside the old Cambridge University building as He-Jin sat at her desk. The office was small but cozy, with books piled neatly on every surface. The clock on the wall showed 4:30 in the afternoon, and the gray clouds made the room feel darker than usual. He-Jin was reading through her doctoral research papers when she noticed something strange. A cream-colored envelope had appeared on her desk. She was sure it hadn't been there a moment ago. The envelope looked old, made of thick paper that felt rough under her fingers. A red wax seal held it close, showing a design of roses and thorns that she had never seen before. "How odd," she said quietly to herself. No one had entered her office all afternoon. The rain continued to tap against her window as she carefully broke the seal. Inside, she found a single piece of paper. The paper felt even older than the envelope, and it had a slight yellow color that came with age. Beautiful handwriting covered the page in dark blue ink. He-Jin adjusted her desk lamp and began to read. "You are cordially invited to attend Her Majesty's garden party this evening at sunset. The Queen's Private Gardens, Cambridge. Formal attire required." He-Jin read the invitation 3 times. Her heart beat faster with each reading. She knew every corner of Cambridge University. She had studied here for 3 years, but she had never heard of the Queen's Private Gardens. The strangest part was the date on the invitation. It showed today's date, but the paper looked hundreds of years old. He-Jin touched the ink carefully. It felt wet, as if someone had written it just moments ago. A sweet smell came from the paper, like roses and rain mixed together. She placed the invitation on her desk and walked to her office window. The rain was falling harder now, making patterns on the glass. Her reflection looked back at her, showing her simple blue sweater and practical work clothes. Formal attire required, she whispered to herself. He-Jin was a practical person. She studied historical documents for her research, so she knew what real old papers looked like. This invitation was either an amazing fake, or it was impossible. The paper felt real. The ink looked right. Even the smell matched what she knew about old documents. She picked up her phone to take a picture of the invitation. But when she tried, the screen went black. She tried again, but her phone wouldn't work at all. When she put it down and stepped away, it started working again. He-Jin felt a shiver run down her spine. The rain seemed to be speaking to her now, its pattern changing from a simple tap to what sounded like words. "Come, come, come." He-Jin looked at her watch. Sunset would be in 2 hours. She had time to go home and change clothes if she wanted to accept this impossible invitation. Part of her mind told her this was crazy. She should stay in her safe office and finish her work. But a stronger part of her, the part that had always loved mysteries and history, was already reaching for her coat. She carefully placed the invitation back in its envelope and put it in her bag. As she did, she noticed something else strange. The wax seal had reformed perfectly, looking as if it had never been broken. "Well," He-Jin said to the empty office, "I suppose I need to find something formal to wear." She turned off her desk lamp and locked her office door. The sound of rain followed her down the hallway, like friendly footsteps accompanying her toward an adventure she couldn't yet imagine. He-Jin stood in front of her closet mirror, looking at herself in an old formal dress she had brought from Korea. The dress was dark blue with simple silver patterns, perfect for a garden party. The rain outside her apartment had not stopped, making soft sounds against her windows. She checked the invitation again. It did not give an exact address, only mentioning the Queen's Private Gardens. He-Jin had studied many old maps of Cambridge during her research. She remembered seeing something about royal gardens near the old city walls. At sunset, He-Jin walked through the wet streets with an umbrella. The rain made everything look different, like a painting with soft edges. Street lamps were starting to come on, creating circles of light in the growing darkness. As she walked down a narrow street she had passed many times before, He-Jin noticed something new. Between 2 old buildings was a small path she had never seen. At its entrance stood a young man in a dark suit, holding a black umbrella. He looked Korean, just like her. "Excuse me," Hae-jin said politely. "Are you also looking for the garden party?" The young man turned, looking relieved to see her. "Yes, I'm Jae-ho. I study historical architecture here, and I received this strange invitation." He pulled out an envelope that looked exactly like hers. "I'm Hae-jin," she replied. "I study historical documents. Did your invitation just appear on your desk too?" Jae-ho nodded. "And my phone wouldn't take pictures of it. I thought I was imagining things." They walked down the narrow path together. The rain seemed to sound different here, more like music than just falling water. The path turned and twisted, and with each turn, the modern buildings of Cambridge seemed to fade away. Finally, they reached an old stone wall with a wooden gate. The gate was covered in roses, even though roses shouldn't bloom in this weather. A soft light came from behind it, despite the darkness of sunset. "Should we?" Hae-jin asked, touching the gate's handle. "Well, we came all this way," Jae-ho said. He sounded nervous but excited. Together, they pushed the gate open. A strange feeling washed over them, like walking through a warm summer rain. When they opened their eyes, everything had changed. The modern world was gone. Instead of plain brick buildings, they saw beautiful old gardens stretching into the distance. Stone paths wound between carefully trimmed hedges. Fountains sprayed water into the air, mixing with the gentle rain. Flowers bloomed everywhere, filling the air with sweet smells. "This is impossible," Jae-ho whispered. His architect's eyes took in the old stone walls and wooden structures. "These buildings, they're perfectly Elizabethan. Not recreations. They're real." Hae-jin noticed their clothes had changed too. Her simple formal dress had become an elegant gown of the same color, but in a style from hundreds of years ago. Jae-ho's modern suit had transformed into fine Tudor-era clothes. From somewhere in the garden came the sound of string music, mixing perfectly with the rain. People in beautiful old clothes walked on the paths ahead of them, holding period-correct umbrellas and talking quietly. A woman in a stunning dress that mixed Korean and English styles approached them. She smiled warmly and bowed in a Korean manner before speaking. "Welcome, Hae-jin and Jae-ho. My name is Soo-min. We've been expecting you. The Queen will be so pleased you could join us. Please, follow me. There is much to explain." Soo-min led Hae-jin and Jae-ho through the magnificent garden. The rain continued to fall softly, but somehow it did not make them wet. Instead, it created a gentle music as it hit the leaves and flowers around them. "You must have many questions," Soo-min said as they walked. Her dress made gentle swooshing sounds against the stone path. "This garden exists in a special moment in time. Here, England and Korea meet in ways that regular history books never recorded." Hae-jin looked at the gardens with wonder. Beautiful Korean peonies grew next to English roses. Stone lanterns from Korean temples stood beside classical European statues. Everything seemed to fit together perfectly, as if this was how it had always been. "But how is this possible?" Jae-ho asked. He reached out to touch a nearby wall. "These stones, they're really from the 16th century. I can tell from their cutting patterns." Soo-min smiled. "Time is not as simple as most people think. Queen Elizabeth has always been curious about the world beyond England. She found a way to create this special place, where knowledge from different times and places can meet." They walked through a series of garden rooms, each more beautiful than the last. In one, English ladies in fine dresses practiced Korean tea ceremonies. In another, Korean scholars studied English books while some English nobles learned to write Korean characters. The rain created a peaceful sound above them, falling on carefully placed tiles that made musical notes. Hae-jin noticed that even the raindrops seemed to move differently here, falling in patterns that looked almost like dancing. "Look there," Soo-min pointed to a large pavilion ahead of them. "That is where we hold our main gatherings. Tonight is very special. The Queen wishes to learn more about Korean music and poetry." As they got closer to the pavilion, They saw more people arriving. Some wore traditional Korean hanbok, others were in Elizabethan court dress, and many wore beautiful combinations of both styles. The sound of soft talking and gentle laughter mixed with the musical rain. "But why did you choose us?" Jin asked, still trying to understand everything she was seeing. "We watch for people who can bridge worlds," Min explained. Jin, you study historical documents with an open mind. Ho, you see the secret stories in old buildings. You both have the ability to understand how different cultures can come together. They reached the pavilion's entrance. Inside, tables were set with both Korean and English dishes. The steam from hot tea rose to meet the cool rain air. Candles protected from the rain cast warm light everywhere. "There is someone else you should meet," Min said. She gestured to a man in scholarly robes that combined Korean and English styles. "This is Tae-young. He has been here since the beginning of the garden." Tae-young turned to greet them with a warm smile. "Welcome to our hidden world," he said. "I hope you will find as much wonder here as I have. But be careful. Time moves strangely in this garden. What feels like minutes here might be hours in your world, or sometimes the other way around." Just then, trumpets sounded in the distance. The rain seemed to pause for a moment, as if it too was listening. "Ah," Min said, her eyes bright with excitement. "The Queen is arriving. Are you ready to be part of a history that no one else knows about?" Everyone in the garden stood straight and quiet as the trumpets sounded again. The rain became even softer, as if it too was showing respect. Jin and Ho watched as the garden paths filled with people walking in careful order. First came the guards in their fine uniforms, carrying tall poles with England's flags. Then came ladies and gentlemen of the court, their clothes shining with gold thread and jewels. The ladies carried small bouquets of mixed English and Korean flowers. Then Queen Elizabethan herself appeared. She walked with grace, her red hair and pale skin glowing in the gentle rain. Her dress was amazing. It combined English royal style with Korean designs. Small bells on her dress made quiet music as she walked. "Look at her crown," Ho whispered to Jin. The Queen's crown had both English and Korean symbols worked into its gold and jewels. Tae-young stepped forward and bowed to the Queen. He spoke in both English and Korean, welcoming her to the evening's celebrations. The Queen smiled and responded in perfect Korean, surprising Jin and Ho. "My dear friends," the Queen said, now speaking English so everyone could understand. "Tonight we celebrate the joining of two great cultures. Through the magic of this garden, we learn from each other in ways that the outside world cannot know about." The Queen looked directly at Jin and Ho. "I see we have new guests. Please come forward." Jin's heart beat fast as she and Ho walked toward the Queen. They bowed deeply, just as Min had taught them a few minutes earlier. "Your Majesty," they said together. "Welcome to our secret gathering," the Queen said kindly. "Tae-young has told me of your work. Jin, you study old documents with great care. Ho, you understand the stories that old buildings tell. These are precious gifts." The Queen raised her hands, and music began to play. It was unlike anything Jin had ever heard. Korean gaejum players performed alongside English lute players, creating beautiful new sounds. "Every person here," the Queen continued, "helps build a bridge between our cultures. Some study art, others music, others science or literature. Together, we create knowledge that exists outside of regular time." The rain started to make patterns in the air, forming shapes that looked like Korean and English letters mixed together. Jin noticed that no one seemed surprised by this magical display. "Tonight," the Queen announced, "we will share stories from both our lands. But first, let us feast together." Tables appeared, filled with dishes from both cultures. The steam from hot English puddings mixed with the aromas of Korean soups. Servants in mixed-style clothes began serving food on plates that had both English and Korean designs. As everyone sat down to eat, He-Jin found herself seated near the queen. On her other side was Tae-young, who smiled warmly at her. "You seem full of questions," Tae-young said quietly. "Good. Questions are how we learn. But remember, in this garden, not all questions have simple answers. Some things we must accept with wonder, like the rain that falls but never makes us wet." The queen nodded, overhearing his words. "Indeed," she said. "And soon, you both will have a very important choice to make." As the feast continued, He-Jin noticed more unusual things about the garden party. The rain created a peaceful backdrop to the conversations happening around her. She watched as English nobles practiced using Korean metal chopsticks, while Korean scholars explained the principles of their astronomy to interested English scientists. A young scholar named Du-yeon approached their table. She wore a dress that looked like it belonged to both times at once, and she carried a large book bound in leather, with both English and Korean writing on its cover. "I am the keeper of records," Du-yeon explained, opening her book. "Queen Elizabeth started this program 50 years ago, though in our world it has been happening for centuries and just a few minutes at the same time." Jiho looked confused. "How is that possible?" Du-yeon turned the pages of her book, showing drawings of other scholars who had visited the garden. "Time moves differently here. The queen discovered that certain places could connect different times and cultures. She chose this garden as one such place." He-Jin saw familiar names in the book. Famous Korean scholars she had studied, shown sitting in this very garden with English philosophers and scientists. "But none of this appears in our history books," she said. "That is the agreement we make," Du-yeon explained. "What happens in the garden stays in the garden. But the knowledge we share here spreads in subtle ways. Have you ever wondered why some English manuscripts from this time show Korean influence? Or why some Korean art from this period has English elements that should not have been possible?" The rain patterns changed again, forming small circles of light that danced around them like fireflies. He-Jin noticed that each raindrop seemed to contain tiny images, glimpses of other times and places. "The queen selects people carefully," Du-yeon continued. "She looks for those who can understand both worlds. Some, like Tae-young, choose to stay here permanently. Others return to their own time, carrying the garden's influence with them in secret ways." A group of musicians began playing nearby. The sound of Korean drums mixed perfectly with English flutes, creating music that had never been heard in either culture alone. "Tonight is special," Du-yeon said, lowering her voice. "The queen will offer both of you a choice. You can become part of our community of scholars. Throughout history, we have been building bridges between cultures that most people never knew existed." He-Jin watched as Korean pottery makers taught English craftsmen their techniques, while English gardeners showed Korean visitors how to grow roses that could bloom in any weather. Everything in the garden seemed to be about sharing and learning. "But what about our lives in the present?" Jiho asked. "Our studies, our families." Du-yeon smiled gently. "Time works differently here, remember. You could spend years in the garden, learning and teaching, and return to your own time as if only a moment had passed. Or you could choose to stay, like some of us have." The rain caught the light from nearby lanterns, creating small rainbows that floated in the air. He-Jin realized that each rainbow showed a different moment in time, past, present, and future all existing together in this magical space. "Take time to think," Du-yeon advised. "Watch, learn, and feel the magic of this place. At midnight, you will need to make your decision." As evening deepened in the magical garden, Tae-young approached He-Jin and Jiho. "Come with me," he said quietly. "There is something special you should see." The rain continued its gentle pattern as they walked along a winding path that seemed to appear just as they needed it. They passed through an archway covered in climbing roses and morning glories blooming together, even though these flowers never bloomed at the same time in the normal world. The path led them to a hidden part of the garden surrounded by tall hedges. In this secret space, He-Jin and Jiho saw something remarkable. A group of people had gathered in a circle. In the center sat Minna, a Korean musician, playing a traditional gaejeum. The instrument's strings made beautiful sounds that mixed with the falling rain. Around Minna, English musicians played their own instruments: lutes, viols, and harps. Together, they created music that had never existed before, a perfect blend of Korean and English sounds. The rain seemed to dance in the air around them, making tiny splashes that added to the melody. "This is our heart," Tae-young explained softly. "Here, we create new things that could never exist in either world alone. Listen carefully to the music. It carries secrets from both times." Hye-jin watched as Korean ceremonial dancers moved gracefully alongside English court dancers. Their different styles of movement came together in beautiful ways. The dancers' colorful clothes made patterns that matched the falling rain. "In this part of the garden," Tae-young continued, "we keep our most precious exchanges. Look there." He pointed to a group of scholars sitting under a pavilion. They were writing in books that used both Korean and English letters together, creating a new way of recording knowledge. Jae-ho studied the pavilion's architecture with amazement. "The building itself," he whispered, "it's neither fully Korean nor fully English. It's something entirely new." The rain began to form shapes in the air. Dragons from Korean stories dancing with English lions, their forms made entirely of falling water. The music seemed to guide these magical creatures in their dance. Minna looked up from her gaejeum and smiled at the newcomers. Her fingers never stopped moving across the strings as she spoke. "Music speaks all languages," she said. "In this garden, we can play songs that will never be heard anywhere else. Each note carries memories of both worlds." Hye-jin noticed small lights floating in the air around the musicians. They looked like fireflies, but each one contained tiny scenes from history, moments when Korean and English culture had almost met in the regular world. "Time flows strangely here," Tae-young reminded them. "In this hidden part of the garden, a single song might last 100 years, or just a second. We keep the most magical things here, away from curious eyes." The music grew stronger, and more rain-made creatures appeared: phoenixes and unicorns, tigers and deer, all dancing together in the air. The sound of the gaejeum mixed perfectly with the English instruments, creating melodies that seemed to tell stories of both lands at once. Soon, Tae-young said, looking at both Hye-jin and Jae-ho, "You will have to choose whether to become part of this magic. But first, watch and listen. Let the music of both worlds fill your hearts." As midnight drew closer, Sumin gathered Hye-jin and Jae-ho near a beautiful fountain where the magical rain formed perfect circles on the water surface. The garden had grown quieter, though the soft music still played in the distance. The time for their important decision had come. "Now you must choose," Sumin said gently. "You can stay here in the garden with us, helping to build bridges between our cultures. Or you can return to your own time, carrying only memories of what you have seen." Hye-jin looked around at the wonderful things they had witnessed. In one corner, she saw Korean doctors teaching English healers about their medicine. In another, English mathematicians shared their knowledge with Korean scholars. The rain continued to fall, making soft music as it touched the leaves and flowers. "If you stay," Sumin explained, "you will become part of this timeless place. You can learn the deepest secrets of both cultures. You can help create new things that have never existed before." She pointed to where Minna still played her music, creating sounds that seemed to make the very air glow with magic. Jae-ho spoke first. "But what about our families, our research, our lives in the present time?" Tae-young stepped forward to answer. "Time works differently here. If you choose to return, you can go back to the exact moment you left. No one will know you were gone, but you will carry the garden's influence with you in subtle ways." Hye-jin watched the rain-made creatures dancing in the air. She thought about her research, about all the mysterious connections between Korean and English history that she had never been able to explain. Now she understood where those connections came from. "How long do we have to decide?" she asked. "Until the last bell tolls at midnight," Sumin answered. "But remember, this choice must come from your heart. Some are meant to stay. Others are meant to carry our secrets back to the world." The queen approached their group, her presence making everyone stand straighter. "Dear friends," she said kindly, "this choice has been faced by every person you see here. Each made their decision based on where they felt they could do the most good." Jaiho looked at the beautiful buildings he had studied all his life. Now he could see how Korean and English designs had influenced each other through this magical garden. As an architect, this knowledge filled him with wonder. Hejin watched the scholars working together, sharing knowledge that would shape both cultures in hidden ways. She thought about all the mysterious documents she had found in her research, the ones that hinted at connections that shouldn't have been possible. The rain grew slightly stronger, but still didn't make them wet. Instead, it seemed to whisper different possibilities to each of them. "Stay, return. Stay, return. You don't have to decide the same way," Taeyang reminded them. "Sometimes partners in learning must take different paths. What matters is following your true calling." The first bell of midnight began to ring. Hejin and Jiho looked at each other, knowing their time to choose had come at last. The final bell of midnight rang through the garden. The rain paused for a moment, as if holding its breath. Hejin and Jiho stood before the queen, ready to share their decisions. "Your Majesty," Jiho spoke first, his voice clear and certain. "I have decided to stay. As an architect, I see how buildings can tell stories that connect people across time. I want to help create more of these connections." The queen smiled warmly and nodded. Then everyone turned to Hejin. She took a deep breath before speaking. "I choose to return," Hejin said softly. "In my research, I have found so many mysterious connections between our cultures. Now I understand where they came from. I want to continue finding these hidden stories and helping others understand them, even if I cannot tell them the whole truth." The rain began falling again, making gentle music that seemed both happy and sad at the same time. Sumin stepped forward with two special items. For Jaiho, she had an architect's compass made of silver that showed both Korean and English measurements. For Hejin, she presented a small journal bound in leather, its pages empty but somehow shimmering with possibility. "These are our parting gifts," Sumin explained. "Jaiho, your compass will help you create new kinds of buildings that blend our cultures. Hejin, your journal will help you record the secret patterns you find in history, though only you will be able to read what you write in it." The queen spoke again, her voice kind but serious. "Remember the promises you have made here. Jiho, you will stay and help create new beauty in our garden. Hejin, you will keep our secrets while searching for traces of our work in the outside world." Minna began playing a farewell song on her gaejeum. English musicians joined in, creating music that mixed joy and sadness together. The rain followed the music's pattern, making shapes of dragons and lions dancing one last time. Hejin hugged Jaiho goodbye. "I will look for signs of your work in the architecture of history," she promised. Jiho smiled and said, "And I will think of you whenever I create something new." Taeyang led Hejin toward the garden gate, while Jaiho stayed behind with his new companions. The rain made a gentle path for them to follow. As they walked, Hejin saw memories in each raindrop. The magical evening, the music, the sharing of knowledge between cultures. At the gate, Taeyang spoke one last time. "The garden will always be here, connecting times and cultures in ways that most people will never know about. Some will stay, like Jaiho, creating new things that blend both worlds. Others, like you, will return to their own time, helping to spread our influence in subtle ways." Hejin stepped through the gate. She felt the familiar warm rain sensation, and then she was back in modern Cambridge. Her phone showed the same time as when she had first received the invitation, but her new journal was in her bag, and her memory was full of wonders. The rain still fell softly outside her office window, but now she knew its secret music. Somewhere in time, in a magical garden, Jaiho was beginning his new life of creating beautiful things that would connect their cultures. And here, in the present, Hejin opened her journal, ready to record the hidden stories of how Korean and English culture had been meeting secretly for centuries in a rainy garden where time worked differently.